Joining us now, Congressman Walter Jones, and I could bet $1,000 if he gets a look at this Senate government budget bill that's coming back. $80 billion for defense, yay, I'm for that. $63 billion for domestic spending increase, almost dollar for dollar. He's likely to vote no. Congressman Jones, have I figured you out or what?
Not likely, but I will vote no. I voted no last night on the House version that went over to the Senate, and we are at the last end of a great nation. We're spending more money than we can bring in from tax revenues, and we don't seem to care. I was joking last night with Mark Meadows, who's a good friend of mine, excuse me, and Jim Jordan, and they've been voting for bills that are not paid for, that raises the debt and the deficit. And I saw them individually, not together, but I told them the same thing. I said, you guys used to be deficit hawks, but you've left the nest. And I hope you will think about coming back to the nest and return being deficit hawks. We are just absolutely. It's just like President Trump. Did he mention debt one time in the State of the Union? I don't think so. Nobody seems to care about the debt growing and the deficit. Some of these outside groups, in fact, there was an article in the Washington Post 2 days ago, I have a copy of it, that this year we will spend over $1 trillion. That is an 84% increase over last year. How much longer can this go before it becomes an economic issue that will probably do more to shake up the Wall Street than what's happened this week?
All right, so Congressman Jones, consider this if you want facts. I know you're a guy that really likes facts and stats. So for almost 20 years, right, 2 decades, between 1979 and 1998, the 10-year average growth rate in U.S. federal debt was more than 100%. That's over a 10-year period. The first big spurt of U.S. debt growth peaked in 1991. That's when we went to war with Kuwait and all that, with Iraq, with a 10-year increase in federal debt of 228%. That saw the total federal debt per person in the U.S. go from $3,700 to $20,000 by 1998. Now, that was then, this is now. So you look at it now, and that has gone up, I don't know, like 1,000%, right? With no end in sight. And you've got an average debt now. How much is the average debt for each person in the United States? Now, do you know what that number is?
I don't have the latest figure on that. I think it's well over $50,000 for every baby born today in Virginia.
You want the number?
I could be a little bit off course.
You want the number?
It's way up there.
It's $65,000 per American. So right now, every American has a $65,000 federal debt on their shoulders, every single one. Think about that, $65,000. I mean, the minute you come out of your mama's womb, you got a $65,000 debt just for being born. That's right. Sick, isn't it?
I imagine that's when the baby cries. They say, oh, no, $65,000, the first cry of a baby born. I owe $65,000. Yes, little baby, you do.
It's unbelievable. And, you're right, Congressman. I mean, I don't even talk about it. During Obama, when he took the $8 trillion debt and over doubled it to $18 trillion, we talked about it a lot on our show. And every time we'd have a Democratic senator or congressman on, we'd ask, tell me the number that's too big. Tell me the number that keeps you up at night. Where does it end? And we'd get a lot of gibberish. But I have to be, honestly, even me, I mean, unless Walter Jones is on my show, I could go days without talking about it.
Oh, yeah.
Have we become immune to this?
It's not a sexy issue. It is a fact of life. Sometimes, me included, we don't want to deal with the facts of life. This is one of those situations where it's going to continue to grow because the American people have not been told yet the pain that you're going to hate to receive is going to come sometime soon because the debt is going to be out of control where we cannot even borrow money to pay down the debt. there's a group. Let me see. I got it right here. I'll get Allison send it to you. Called the Stansberry Digest. Have you heard of it?
Yes.
Okay. One of my dear friends takes this digest. He sent it up to me. And the subtitle says the article below is about our ever-increasing government debt is food for serious thought for all serious investors. Well, I don't take this digest. He does because he's retired. It says the clock is ticking on the next fiscal crisis. The Goldilocks economy won't last forever. Critical analysis from the U.S. Treasury. At some point in time, I know that not everybody's concerned about what's happening on Wall Street, but there are many people who are concerned. At some point in time, the concern will have no option. And that's why I'm very outspoken on the growing debt of this nation. It just cannot keep going down this road before the crash.
All right, so everybody knows what we're talking about here. So here are the exact figures, right? So the U.S. Treasury, our government Treasury, expects to borrow $955 billion this fiscal year, just under $1 trillion. This was according to documents released on Wednesday, today. It's the highest amount of borrowing in 6 years and double what we borrowed last year, which was about $520 billion. So the Treasury mainly attributed the increase to the fiscal outlook. The Congressional Budget Office, or CBO, was more blunt. In a report earlier this week, the CBO said tax receipts are going to be lower because of the new tax law, and that economic activity as a result of the new tax law was going to lag behind it. So this figure is expected to go down, but in this fiscal year coming up, we're expected to borrow another $1 trillion, bringing our national debt to $20 trillion. $20 trillion. I mean, there's no way to ever pay this down, right? I mean,
no.
There's no way.
Well, John, I think it won't happen in my lifetime, maybe yours, but if you ever got a president that would deal with this, I think for years after it's dealt with, then it'll be a good quality of life because we got a handle. Everybody has debt. As long as you got a job and you got debt, you can stay current each month by paying on your debt. We don't even do that anymore. Mm-hmm. The listeners of your show, including myself, I have debt, but I have a job. If I didn't have a job, I couldn't pay on the debt. Well, America has not paid on the debt since Bill Clinton left office. We just grow the debt now. We don't pay on the debt.
Right. And
not even the interest on the debt.
And the belief in Washington and on Wall Street has long been that, look, we can just keep borrowing because people around the world, they're eager to invest in the U.S. and they're going to buy up the safe haven because they think, they can't lose. They're always going to get paid off. But, there might be a limit to how much the global market wants to buy, especially if we get inflation and investors prefer to ditch bonds for higher returning stakes on the global market. Because what's happening now is we issue the debt. Well, somebody's got to buy that bond, right? I mean, that you just don't print money. I mean, you do, but that's not the way it works. So you have $1 trillion debt. Another $1 trillion means the government has to issue another $1 trillion of bonds. So somebody in Europe or France or Germany or wherever, they're buying U.S. bonds with a guaranteed interest behind it. So that means they're the debt holder. All right. So they have the bond. Yep. Those bonds come due. Interest has got to get paid on it. But that's the money that's funding the government. If people stop buying the bonds that are being issued, you can't raise any more money, right? Then if you've got to print money with no debt because nobody will buy it, then you get hyperinflation, and then it's Armageddon.
Well, John, you gave a great analysis of the problem, and that's what we're headed for because neither party wants to do what is right for the next generation. They want to do for the present generation, but not the next generation. And I told so many people I don't have any grandchildren. I never will have grandchildren. but I feel a moral obligation to make sure that the next generation will not curse the day they were born in America.
Well, look, I mean, the only way out of this, because, Congressman, in your lifetime, we're never going to get the fiscal responsibility in order to cut domestic spending. You're going to have to cut entitlements. That's not going to happen. So the only way out of this is by growing out of it. And you're going to have massive growth and full employment and everybody paying taxes in order to reverse the trend of borrowing $1 trillion back where the borrowing starts to go down. So at some point, you're actually funding 1 year of the government without borrowing money. And then you got a chance to then, cut into that debt. But when the CBO was saying, look, we're going to borrow $1 trillion in this fiscal year, $1 trillion in the next fiscal year, it becomes a pretty scary proposition, right? And like you say, I mean, as long as the economy is growing, it's masked. But if that stops happening, then all hell breaks loose.
Well, John, we had General Mattis, Secretary of Defense, before the Armed Services Committee yesterday. And, of course, my 5 minutes, that's all you get, was to ask about Afghanistan. And I mean, I'm for a strong military. But if I knew that all the money in these budget bills was going to stay right here to rebuild our military and make it the strongest military in the world, I would be in favor of it. But I know that a large percentage of the budget for the Defense Department is going to Afghanistan and these other countries. It just gets to a point that no one is telling America, we've got to fix this country. Once we get fixed this country, then we'll look around the world. But right now, we just think we can police the world, go around the world, spend billions in Afghanistan, billions in Iraq, and make everybody whole. It's just not going to happen.
What did General Mattis say? What did Secretary of Defense Mattis say when you asked him a direct question about the justification of our continual involvement in Afghanistan, which, as you know, there's just been more slaughter and carnage over there a couple of weeks ago with no end in sight. What was his response to you?
Well, I'll get Allison to send. We got copies of it. I'm going to keep all my comments, and the next time he comes in, I'll have a folder. I can go right back and see what he said. And basically what he did, I went on for 3.5 minutes, almost 4, so he didn't get as much time, but he did give me an answer. The one thing that he did not answer was why in the world are the American taxpayers paying the Afghans to have sex with little boys? Why are we not doing something about telling these people if the American taxpayers are going to pay to be in Afghanistan, you're going to stop having sex with little boys? I don't care what your culture is. The American people don't approve of that.
What did he say?
Well, he didn't give me a direct answer. You'll see it. And I close with that again. They're always saying, well, we got a new strategy. The new strategy has been approved by the president. We got coalition troops helping us. I've got a young Marine working as a fellow on my staff this time who's a captain. He's been to Afghanistan. These coalition troops that General Mattis talked about helping us, they're not embedded with the Afghans or with the Americans. They're just doing what I call backup work. That's why I'm frustrated. You're frustrated. Anybody that knows that we're spending all this kind of money and blood, and we got nothing to show for it after 16 years. Nothing. They're still blowing up Kabul.
We have body bags to show for it.
Well, yeah. I mean, we had, I've signed, I think this past weekend, 3 letters. When I say 3 letters, that's 3 families who lost loved ones. This goes back to the debt situation. I don't know if anybody cares anymore. I know you care. Many of your listeners care. Many of my constituents care. But life goes on, and somebody's son or daughter just died. Well, I'm sorry about it.
It's very frustrating. They don't even want to talk about it. I mean, I bring it up and, like, blank stares. I mean, nobody wants to justify Afghanistan. Nobody wants to talk about it. And I'm telling you, Congressman, I've said this for a long time, too much money is being made there. I mean, every time we put troops in, contractors, suppliers, have a lobbyist. I mean, we have, just like General Eisenhower said, be very, very afraid of the growing U.S. military complex. It's going to eat you alive. And there's just too many people supplying the war efforts that we have, making way too much money. And that money gets spread around, and it goes back in the coffers, and it goes here and it goes there. And they have lobbyists, and then it's justified. I mean, we sent an additional 5,000 troops to Afghanistan against Trump's campaign promise. Yep. Nobody has said what difference did that make or what are we doing there. And then we have all this carnage in Afghanistan 2 weeks ago, and nobody has a single question. Like, nobody has even said, why the hell are we there? What's the mission? What's the end game? I mean, the last thing that General McMaster of Disguise said is that, well, you know, we just might have to be there in perpetuity. Well, what? Perpetuity?
Well,
like what? Japan? Unbelievable. I mean,
well,
it's
is, and many members of Congress in both parties, even your congressman that was in the Navy, I mean, a SEAL. We just, it's almost like the leadership, in this case, Paul Ryan, has not permitted us to have a debate, and he can order the committee chairman right now today to mark up an AUMF authorization of military force, get it to the floor of the House, and we're going to let the House of Representatives have a full hour of debate on the policy in Afghanistan. He won't do it.
All right,
just won't do it.
He isn't going to do it. Look, how long have we been talking about this, right? Every congressman I have on, oh, yeah, Paul Ryan says we're going to have a debate. Oh, yeah, we're going to have AMF. Yeah. Oh, yeah, well, we can't put Barbara Lee's bill in rules because that's the wrong place. Well, we're going to have it. Well, just, you know, get back to me next month. Here it is, 2018. We're a fifth of the way in before recess in August, and crickets. Crickets is what we have. Congressman, I'm out of time. John Fredericks,
okay.
Radio
Thank
Network.
You, John.
More information,
Bye-bye.
jones.house.gov. I got to go. Keep it right here.